Captain Sarah Martinez had been waiting in the Pentagon's Stark conference room for 20 minutes when Admiral Robert Hawkins finally walked in. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the mahogany table where she sat reviewing mission briefings. She stood immediately, her army uniform crisp and perfectly pressed, ribbons gleaming under the bright lights. Admiral Hawkins barely glanced in her direction as he tossed his leather portfolio onto the table with a dismissive thud. His weathered face carried the kind of arrogance that came from decades of commanding respect through intimidation rather than earning it through merit. The seal trident on his chest seemed to catch the light as he deliberately took his time, settling into his chair. "So, you're the officer they sent me," he said, his voice dripping with condescension as his eyes finally met hers. "Captain Martinez, right? I have to say, I was expecting someone with a bit more presence for this joint operation." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had dealt with men like Hawkins before, officers who believed that rank and gender determined capability rather than skill and dedication. "Yes, sir. Captain Sarah Martinez, 75th Ranger Regiment. I'm here to discuss the intelligence coordination for Operation Desert Storm." The Admiral leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Captain," he drawled, emphasizing her rank like it was something distasteful. "I've been running SEAL operations since before you were probably even thinking about joining the military. This mission requires someone with real combat experience, not someone who got their rank through diversity quotas." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt the familiar fire building in her chest, but years of military discipline kept her voice steady. "Admiral, I believe my service record speaks for itself. I've completed 3 tours in Afghanistan and have led multiple high-risk operations with 0 casualties among my teams." Hawkins waved his hand dismissively. "Paper achievements, Captain. Any desk jockey can compile an impressive-looking file. What I need to know is whether you can handle yourself when bullets start flying and lives are on the line. This isn't some training exercise where you get a participation trophy." Sarah's hands remained clasped behind her back, but her knuckles had gone white. She had spent years proving herself in a male-dominated field, excelling in every challenge thrown her way. She had earned her rank through blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights, not through any quota system. But explaining this to someone who had already made up his mind seemed pointless. "I understand your concerns, Admiral," she replied carefully. "Perhaps we could review the mission parameters and discuss how our teams can best coordinate to ensure success." The Admiral's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Oh, we'll get to that. But first, let me ask you something, Captain. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's life depended entirely on your ability to make a split-second decision under fire? Have you ever had to choose between saving yourself and saving your team?" Sarah's mind flashed to a dusty compound in Kandahar, the weight of her rifle, the sound of enemy fire echoing off concrete walls. She remembered the precision required, the steady breathing, the moment when everything depended on her ability to eliminate a threat from 800 meters away. But she simply nodded. "Yes, sir, I have." Hawkins muttered, clearly unconvinced. "Well, I suppose we'll see how you handle yourself when things get real. This operation isn't going to succeed on good intentions and positive thinking. It requires someone who can do what needs to be done when it needs to be done without hesitation." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. Sarah maintained her professional posture, but inside, she was calculating how many ways she could prove this arrogant man wrong. She had faced down enemy combatants, survived ambushes, and earned the respect of some of the toughest soldiers in the Army. She wasn't about to be intimidated by someone who clearly judged books by their covers. Admiral Hawkins opened his portfolio and began spreading documents across the table. "The mission briefing indicates we'll be working with limited intelligence in a hostile environment. My SEAL teams are accustomed to operating under these conditions. I hope your people can keep up." Sarah stepped forward to examine the documents, her trained eye immediately identifying key tactical considerations and potential challenges. Despite the Admiral's condescending attitude, she was determined to focus on the mission. Lives would depend on their ability to work together, regardless of his personal prejudices. The terrain looks challenging, she observed, pointing to the topographical maps. Multiple elevation changes and limited sight lines. We'll need to coordinate our positioning carefully to avoid friendly fire incidents. Hawkins glanced up at her with barely concealed surprise, as if he hadn't expected her to understand tactical considerations. Yes, well, my boys know how to handle themselves. The question is whether your people can adapt to real-world conditions instead of textbook scenarios. The insult was becoming tiresome, but Sarah maintained her composure. She had learned long ago that responding to provocations with anger only played into the hands of people like Hawkins. Instead, she would let her actions speak louder than his words. When the time came, she would show him exactly what kind of soldier she was. The briefing continued for another hour, with Admiral Hawkins systematically questioning every suggestion Sarah made. When she proposed alternative extraction routes, he dismissed them as overly cautious. When she highlighted potential security risks, he waved them off as paranoid thinking. It was clear that he had no intention of treating her as an equal partner in this operation. "Captain," he said finally, closing his portfolio with a sharp snap, "I think it's important that we establish the chain of command here. While this is technically a joint operation, my teams will be taking point on all critical phases. Your people will provide support as needed, but the real work will be handled by professionals." Sarah felt something snap inside her chest, but her voice remained deadly calm. "Admiral, with respect, the mission briefing indicates that both our teams have specific expertise that's essential for success. My Rangers have specialized training that complements your SEAL capabilities." Hawkins stood up, using his height advantage to look down at her. "Specialized training," he repeated mockingly. "Captain, let me explain something to you. When you're a SEAL, you learn to operate in conditions that would break most people. We don't rely on backup plans or safety nets. We get the job done, period." The condescension in his voice was like sandpaper against Sarah's nerves. She had heard variations of this speech before, the belief that only certain units, only certain people, were capable of real excellence. It ignored the fact that elite soldiers existed in many forms, each bringing unique skills to complex operations. "I'm sure your teams are highly capable, Admiral," Sarah replied evenly. "Just as mine are. Perhaps we could focus on how to best utilize everyone's strengths." Hawkins laughed, the sound echoing off the conference room walls. "Strengths? Captain, I've seen your file. You've spent most of your career in support roles. This mission is going to require someone who can make hard choices and live with the consequences. It's not about being politically correct or making everyone feel included." The accusation stung because it was so fundamentally wrong. Sarah's career had been built on frontline service, on making exactly the kind of hard choices Hawkins was describing. She had earned her position through performance under fire, not through any favoritism or quota system. But explaining this to someone who had already decided she was inadequate seemed impossible. "Admiral, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about my background," she began carefully. "My service record includes extensive combat operations and leadership under extremely challenging conditions." "Misunderstanding." Hawkins's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Captain, I've been doing this for 30 years. I can spot someone who's been promoted beyond their capabilities from a mile away. This mission is too important to risk on someone who might freeze up when things get ugly." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with tension. Sarah realized that no amount of reasonable discussion was going to change Admiral Hawkins's mind. He had decided who she was based on his own prejudices, and nothing she said would alter that judgment. But that didn't mean she had to accept his characterization silently. "Admiral, I understand your concerns about mission success," she said, her voice carrying a new edge. "I share those concerns. That's why I believe it's important to base tactical decisions on actual capabilities rather than assumptions." Hawkins's expression hardened. "Assumptions? Captain, I'm basing my assessment on 30 years of experience leading men into combat. I know what it takes to succeed in this business, and I know what failure looks like. This operation is going to test everyone involved, and I need to know that my people are working with professionals, not with someone who got their rank through diversity initiatives. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah felt the familiar weight of having to prove herself all over again, despite years of exemplary service. It was exhausting, this constant need to demonstrate that she belonged in rooms like this, that her presence wasn't a token gesture, but the result of genuine expertise. I earned my rank through performance, Admiral, she said quietly. The same way every professional soldier does. Performance, Hawkins repeated, as if the word tasted bitter. Captain, performing well in a controlled environment is very different from performing when lives are on the line. This mission is going to require split-second decisions and absolute precision. There's no room for hesitation or second-guessing. Sarah's mind drifted to a rooftop in Kabul, the feeling of desert wind against her face, the weight of her rifle steady in her hands. She remembered the calculations, the breathing exercises, the moment when everything narrowed down to the crosshairs and the target. She remembered the quiet satisfaction of a mission completed flawlessly, of lives saved through precision and skill. I understand the stakes, Admiral, she said simply. Hawkins gathered his papers, clearly preparing to leave. I hope so, Captain, because when we're in country, there won't be time for learning curves or on-the-job training. My SEALs are counting on working with someone who can handle themselves under pressure. As he headed toward the door, he paused and looked back at her. One more thing, Captain. In my experience, the people who talk the most about their capabilities are usually the ones who have the most to prove. I hope that's not the case here. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Sarah alone in the conference room. She remained standing for a long moment, processing the conversation and planning her next moves. Admiral Hawkins had made it clear that he didn't respect her rank, her training, or her presence on this mission. But respect, she had learned, was something that couldn't be demanded or explained into existence. It had to be demonstrated. 3 days later, Sarah found herself in the middle of a joint training exercise designed to test coordination between the SEAL and Ranger teams. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly in all directions, its harsh landscape providing the perfect proving ground for the upcoming mission. The morning sun was already brutal, promising another scorching day of tactical drills and equipment testing. Admiral Hawkins had insisted on observing the exercise personally, positioning himself at the command post where he could monitor all team communications. Sarah noticed him watching her team's movements through high-powered binoculars, his expression skeptical as he tracked their progress across the desert floor. The exercise scenario was complex. Multiple hostile positions needed to be neutralized simultaneously while protecting civilian assets and maintaining communication blackout protocols. It required the kind of precision timing and coordination that could only come from teams that trusted each other completely. Sarah's Rangers had been assigned the northern approach, a challenging route that included several elevation changes and limited cover. The terrain would test their ability to move silently while maintaining visual contact with their targets. Meanwhile, the SEAL teams would approach from the south, using their expertise in rapid insertion and close-quarters combat. Bravo team, report your position, crackled through Sarah's earpiece as she led her Rangers across a particularly exposed section of desert. The heat was already becoming oppressive, but her team moved with the fluid precision that came from months of training together. Bravo team is 2 clicks from target Alpha, she responded quietly, her eyes scanning the rocky outcroppings ahead for signs of the enemy position. Maintaining radio silence from this point forward. Through her scope, Sarah could see the mock enemy installation that served as their primary target. The instructors had done an excellent job creating a realistic scenario, complete with roving patrols and multiple defensive positions. Successfully neutralizing this target would require patience, skill, and perfect timing. Admiral Hawkins's voice cut through the command frequency, his tone already critical. Bravo team is moving too slowly. At this rate, they'll miss their window for coordinated assault. Sarah gritted her teeth, but maintained radio discipline. Hawkins was watching their every move, looking for any sign of weakness or hesitation that would confirm his negative assessment. But rushing through this phase of the operation would be tactically unsound and potentially dangerous. Her team reached the designated overwatch position just as the SEAL teams reported their readiness for the coordinated strike. Sarah positioned herself behind her rifle, feeling the familiar comfort of the weapon's weight and balance. The target was 850 meters away, well within her effective range, but requiring absolute precision given the proximity of friendly forces. All teams stand by for synchronized assault, came the command from the control post. Execute on my mark. Sarah's breathing slowed as she settled into her shooting position. Through her scope, she could see the designated target clearly, a mock enemy commander positioned in an elevated observation post. The shot would need to be perfect, as missing could compromise the entire exercise and potentially endanger the SEAL teams approaching from below. Mark, execute, execute. The desert erupted in coordinated movement as both teams launched their assault. Sarah's finger found the trigger, her mind calculating wind speed, distance, and trajectory in the split second before she fired. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and through her scope, she watched the training round strike its target with perfect precision. Around her, the rest of the exercise unfolded with clockwork efficiency. Her Rangers moved through their assigned objectives with practiced ease, clearing positions and securing the mock facility while maintaining perfect communication discipline. The SEAL teams performed equally well, their own expertise evident in their rapid advancement and tactical coordination. Within 20 minutes, the entire exercise was complete. All objectives had been secured, all targets neutralized, and both teams had successfully extracted without casualties. By any measure, it had been a flawless demonstration of joint operational capability. Back at the command post, Admiral Hawkins was reviewing the exercise data with the training instructors. Sarah could see him pointing at various charts and displays, his expression serious as he analyzed their performance. When she approached to debrief with her team, she caught fragments of his conversation. Impressive coordination, but I still have concerns about consistency under real pressure. SEAL teams performed as expected. No surprises there. Need to see more before I'm convinced about cross-unit reliability. Sarah felt a familiar frustration building in her chest. No matter how well her team performed, it seemed that Admiral Hawkins would find reasons to question their capabilities. The exercise had been executed flawlessly, with both teams demonstrating exactly the kind of coordination and skill that would be essential for mission success. Captain Martinez, one of the training instructors, called out, approaching with a tablet displaying exercise results. Outstanding performance from your team. That long-range shot was particularly impressive. 850 meters in these wind conditions is challenging even for our best marksmen. Sarah nodded her thanks, but her attention was drawn to Admiral Hawkins, who had overheard the instructor's comments. His expression was unreadable as he approached, his eyes fixed on her with new intensity. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying a different tone than she had heard before. "That was decent work out there. Your team showed good discipline under simulated pressure." The grudging acknowledgement was progress, but Sarah could sense that Hawkins was still not fully convinced. She had proven her team's capabilities in a controlled environment, but she knew that his real judgment would come when they faced actual combat conditions. The exercise had been a good start, but it was only the beginning of earning his respect. "Thank you, Admiral," she replied simply. "My team is ready for whatever challenges the mission presents." Hawkins studied her for a long moment, as if trying to read something in her expression. "We'll see, Captain. We'll see." The mission launch came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports indicated that their target had accelerated his timeline, forcing the joint operation to deploy within 48 hours. Sarah found herself on a military transport aircraft, the familiar sound of engines drowning out conversation as both teams made final equipment checks, and reviewed operational procedures. Admiral Hawkins had been unusually quiet during the pre-deployment briefing, his earlier skepticism replaced by the focused intensity that came before real operations. Whatever his personal opinions about Sarah's capabilities, he was professional enough to recognize that mission success now depended on everyone performing at their highest level. The target was a heavily fortified compound in hostile territory, where a high-value enemy asset was coordinating attacks against coalition forces. Intelligence suggested that the window for capture or elimination would be narrow, requiring perfect coordination between insertion, assault, and extraction phases. Sarah studied the aerial reconnaissance photos one final time, memorizing every detail of the compound's layout. The mission called for her team to establish overwatch positions on the surrounding ridgelines while the SEAL teams conducted the primary assault. Her role would be to provide precision fire support and coordinate with air assets if extraction became complicated. 30 minutes to insertion. The pilot's voice crackled through the aircraft's intercom system. Both teams began their final preparations, checking weapons, communications gear, and emergency equipment with a methodical thoroughness that separated elite units from regular forces. Admiral Hawkins moved through the aircraft, speaking quietly with his team leaders and reviewing last-minute tactical adjustments. When he reached Sarah's position, he paused, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "Captain," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I know we've had our differences, but out there, we're all depending on each other. I need to know that you're ready for this." Sarah met his gaze directly. "Admiral, my team is ready. We'll do our job." Hawkins nodded slowly, but she could see doubt still lingering in his eyes. Despite the successful training exercise, he remained unconvinced that she and her Rangers could handle the pressure of actual combat. It was frustrating, but Sarah had learned that some people would only believe what they witnessed firsthand. The insertion went smoothly, with both teams reaching their designated positions without enemy contact. Sarah's Rangers established themselves on a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility over the entire compound. Through her scope, she could observe enemy movement patterns and identify key targets for the upcoming assault. "Overwatch in position," she reported quietly through a radio. "Multiple hostiles visible, but patterns suggest normal security posture. No indication of elevated alert status." Admiral Hawkins's voice came through the command frequency. "Acknowledged Overwatch. Assault teams moving to final positions. Standby for ghost signal." The next few minutes passed in tense silence as the SEAL teams maneuvered closer to their entry points. Sarah watched through her scope, tracking enemy sentries and calculating firing solutions for multiple targets. The compound was more heavily defended than intelligence had suggested, with additional guards posted at locations that hadn't appeared in the reconnaissance photos. "Control, this is Overwatch," Sarah transmitted. "Enemy strength appears greater than expected. Count at least 12 additional hostiles not identified in pre-mission intelligence." There was a pause before Admiral Hawkins responded. "Overwatch, confirm enemy count and positions." Sarah systematically identified each enemy position, providing detailed information about their weapons, fields of fire, and potential threat levels. The intelligence was crucial for adjusting the assault plan, but it also meant that the mission had become significantly more dangerous than originally anticipated. "Control, recommend delaying assault until additional enemy positions can be neutralized," Sarah advised. "Current approach routes will expose assault teams to concentrated defensive fire." Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could imagine the rapid tactical assessment happening at the command post as Admiral Hawkins weighed the new information against mission timeline pressures. The decision would determine whether the operation proceeded as planned or required immediate adaptation. "Negative, Overwatch," came Hawkins's response. "Mission timeline is critical. Assault teams will adapt approach routes based on your intelligence. Maintain Overwatch and provide fire support as needed." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night air. The Admiral was proceeding with an assault against a more heavily defended target than expected, relying on his SEAL teams to overcome the odds through superior training and tactics. It was a calculated risk, but one that could easily turn catastrophic if anything went wrong. Understood, Control. Overwatch standing by. The assault began exactly on schedule, with SEAL teams breaching the compound's perimeter from two directions simultaneously. Through her scope, Sarah watched the carefully choreographed operation unfold, tracking friendly forces and identifying threats as they emerged. Within minutes, the situation began to deteriorate. Enemy resistance was fiercer than expected, and the additional defensive positions Sarah had identified were proving highly effective at pinning down the assault teams. Urgent radio traffic filled the command frequency as team leaders requested fire support and medical assistance. Overwatch, I need immediate suppression of enemy position at grid 347291. Came an urgent request from one of the SEAL team leaders. We're taking heavy fire and cannot advance. Sarah swung her rifle toward the designated position, quickly identifying 3 enemy fighters in a reinforced bunker that hadn't appeared on any intelligence briefings. The range was challenging, nearly 900 meters in low light conditions, but the shot was essential for allowing the pinned-down SEALs to continue their advance. Her breathing slowed as she settled into the shooting position, calculating wind drift and elevation adjustment for the extended range. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flashes from the enemy position, each one representing deadly fire directed at the trapped SEAL team below. The first shot struck perfectly, eliminating the primary threat and allowing the SEALs to advance. But as Sarah prepared for follow-up shots, she realized that the entire mission was balanced on a knife's edge. One mistake, one missed shot, one moment of hesitation could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Admiral Hawkins's voice cut through the radio chatter, tight with stress. All teams, sound off with status reports. We need to accelerate this timeline. The responses painted a picture of a mission that was rapidly spinning beyond anyone's control. What had been planned as a surgical strike was turning into a prolonged firefight, exactly the kind of scenario that joint operations were designed to avoid. The firefight intensified as enemy reinforcements arrived from an unexpected direction. Sarah watched through her scope as vehicles approached the compound from the east, carrying additional fighters that would completely overwhelm the SEAL teams if they reached defensive positions. The mission was rapidly becoming a disaster, and immediate action was required to prevent catastrophic casualties. Control, this is Overwatch, Sarah transmitted urgently. Enemy reinforcements approaching from grid 351288. Estimate 2 vehicles with at least 8 additional hostiles. Recommend immediate air support. Negative on air support. Admiral Hawkins responded, his voice strained with the pressure of a rapidly deteriorating situation. Assets are committed elsewhere. All teams need to accelerate extraction timeline. But extraction was impossible while the SEAL teams remained pinned down by enemy fire. The additional reinforcements would arrive within minutes, turning a difficult situation into an impossible one. Sarah realized that conventional fire support wouldn't be sufficient to deal with multiple moving targets at extreme range. Through her scope, she could see the lead vehicle clearly now, an armed pickup truck carrying several fighters and what appeared to be a heavy machine gun. If that weapon reached an elevated position overlooking the compound, it would have clear fields of fire over the entire assault area. The SEAL teams would be trapped with no possibility of escape. Sarah's mind raced through the tactical possibilities, calculating angles, distances, and timing. The shot she was contemplating was beyond the limits of what most snipers would attempt. A moving target at nearly 1,000 meters, with multiple variables affecting bullet trajectory. But it was the only option that could prevent a complete mission failure. She adjusted her scope for the extreme range, her breathing becoming deeper and more controlled as she entered the focused state that had served her through countless high-pressure situations. The vehicle was moving at approximately 40 kilometers per hour across uneven terrain, creating a complex firing solution that required split-second timing and perfect execution. The crosshairs tracked the driver's position as Sarah calculated lead time and elevation adjustment. One shot, perfectly placed, could disable the vehicle and delay the reinforcements long enough for the SEAL teams to complete their extraction. Miss, and the entire mission would collapse into catastrophic failure. Her finger found the trigger as the vehicle approached the optimal firing position. Time seemed to slow as every aspect of her training focused into this single moment. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and she watched through her scope as the heavy bullet traced its path across the desert night. The impact was devastating. The vehicle veered sharply off course, rolling twice before coming to rest in a cloud of dust and debris. The second vehicle immediately stopped, its occupants seeking cover rather than continuing their advance toward the compound. The immediate threat had been neutralized, buying precious time for the extraction. "Outstanding shot, Overwatch," came the excited voice of one of the SEAL team leaders. "Enemy reinforcements are neutralized. We're beginning extraction now." Admiral Hawkins's voice cut through the radio chatter, and Sarah could hear a new tone of respect in his transmission. "Overwatch, confirms status of enemy reinforcements. Control, lead vehicle is disabled. Secondary vehicle has taken defensive positions approximately 800 meters from compound perimeter. Immediate threat to extraction is neutralized." The extraction proceeded smoothly after that, with both SEAL teams successfully withdrawing from the compound with their primary objectives achieved. The mission that had seemed destined for failure had been salvaged through precise coordination and exceptional individual performance under extreme pressure. During the flight back to base, Admiral Hawkins made his way through the aircraft to where Sarah sat, cleaning her rifle. The other team members were celebrating the successful mission completion, but his expression was serious as he approached her position. "Captain," he said, settling into the seat beside her, "I owe you an apology." Sarah looked up from her weapon maintenance, surprised by the admission. Throughout the mission, she had focused entirely on performance rather than seeking recognition or validation. But hearing the Admiral acknowledge her contribution felt like a weight being lifted from her shoulders. "I made assumptions about your capabilities based on factors that had nothing to do with your actual skills," Hawkins continued. "That shot tonight, disabling a moving vehicle at that range, under those conditions, that's the kind of precision that saves lives and completes missions. I was wrong to question your readiness." Sarah finished reassembling her rifle before responding. "Admiral, we all have preconceptions that we need to overcome. What matters is that the mission succeeded and everyone made it home safely." Hawkins nodded, but his expression remained serious. "No, Captain, it's more than that. I let my biases affect my professional judgment, and that could have compromised this operation. Your performance tonight, not just the shooting, but the tactical intelligence and situational awareness, that's the kind of expertise that makes joint operations successful." As he spoke, Sarah noticed Admiral Hawkins's gaze drawn to her left forearm, where her sleeve had rolled up during the weapon cleaning process. There, clearly visible in the aircraft's harsh lighting, was a detailed tattoo that she usually kept hidden beneath her uniform sleeves. The tattoo depicted a sniper's crosshairs centered over a mountain landscape, with precise distance markings and wind indicators incorporated into the artistic design. Below the crosshairs, in small but clearly readable text, were the words 1,247 meters, Kandahar Province, 2018, along with other notations that indicated multiple long-range engagements. Admiral Hawkins went completely still as he processed what he was seeing. The tattoo wasn't just decorative artwork. It was a professional record of some of the most challenging sniper engagements in recent military history. Each notation represented a successful long-range elimination under combat conditions, the kind of precision shooting that few soldiers in any service could achieve. "Captain," he said quietly, his voice carrying a new level of respect and understanding, "I think I may have seriously underestimated your background." Sarah followed his gaze to her exposed tattoo, then calmly rolled down her sleeve to cover the markings. She had never been one to advertise her accomplishments, preferring to let her work speak for itself rather than relying on past achievements for credibility. "Admiral, I believe in focusing on current missions rather than past successes," she replied simply. Tonight's operation required teamwork and coordination. Individual achievements matter less than collective success. But Admiral Hawkins was now viewing everything that had happened through a completely different lens. The precise intelligence gathering, the impossible long-range shot that had saved the mission, the calm professionalism under extreme pressure. It all made sense now. He had been trying to evaluate an elite sniper using the wrong criteria entirely. "Captain Martinez," he said formally, "I want you to know that I would be honored to work with you and your team on future operations. Your expertise and leadership are exactly what joint operations need to succeed." The aircraft continued its journey through the night sky, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. What had begun as a mission clouded by prejudice and skepticism had ended with mutual respect and recognition of professional excellence. Sarah had proven herself through action rather than argument, demonstrating that true capability couldn't be determined by assumptions or bias. As the base came into view below them, Admiral Hawkins stood to return to his seat, but he paused for one final comment. "Captain, that was some of the finest precision shooting I've witnessed in 30 years of service. Thank you for making this mission a success." Sarah nodded her acknowledgement, but her mind was already moving forward to future challenges and missions. The Admiral's recognition was gratifying, but what mattered most was that professional barriers had been broken down through demonstrated competence. Future joint operations would be built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than skeptical evaluation. The W.